So I went to the store today, and my daughter wanted to get some Pokemon cards, so I got a pack for me, my daughter, and my son to open together today. I actually got a pretty cool Mew card. I thought it was pretty sick. It's like a Mew. I don't know anything about the TCG, but I just really liked this art. So I might sleeve this bad boy and keep it kind of nice, because I actually think that's pretty cool art. I really like it. What's up, everybody? Preston Clark, that's me. You know it, I know it, everybody here knows it. And with Scarlet and Violet coming up, and with the community-driven Spike Muth Cup on Pokemon Showdown, I wanted to go over some tips and tricks, I guess you could say, about competing in a non-Dynamax format. So, if you're somebody that started with Sword and Shield, and you've been playing Dynamax for the last 3 years, or even if Scarlet and Violet is going to be your first time that you dip your toes a little bit into VGC, I wanted to do some of those tips and tricks to kind of help you guys get down to some basics, some fundamentals for non-Dynamax play. So I took it to Twitter. I asked you guys, do you got any specific advice or tips for players for getting ready for non-Dynamax formats? And here's what you guys had to say. Really quick, I just want to say thank you to everybody who participated on Twitter and commented on that post. I really appreciate all your tips and tricks, and I know that a lot of this advice is going to be great for the new players that haven't really had much experience with Dynamax, so I really appreciate you guys. Thank you. So first up is Nuno at Pyreon PT. The biggest difference I've noticed is the risk-reward trade-off. Dynamax centralized the game so much that you could make risky plays with huge payoff if they nullified their Dynamax. And that is not as worthy in a non-max format and needs some adjustment. Nuno, thank you so much for commenting, and I think you're right. I think a really big difference with Dynamax versus non-Dynamax is Dynamax really made it so that there was really big payoff for 3 turns usually. It really made it so that there was Pokemon that were very centralized with their Dynamax. We know who they are. You know, Venusaur on some teams was almost always Dynamaxed, and Charizard was almost always Dynamaxed on some teams. Then you had things like in Trick Room with like Calyrex Ice Rider, being able to go big, really get a lot of payoff for that. Your risk versus reward was huge for that. And it also made so that if your opponent made a risky play, or you put them in a bad position, or even if you were in a bad position, you were able to Dynamax, take whatever hit that they were about to hit you with, hit back with something just as hard, even harder, maybe even revenge KO their Pokemon, and you'd be good to go. Your board positioning was definitely a lot different with Dynamax. You're not going to be able to lead on the field or be in a poor position where your opponent has something that can one-hit KO your side of the field, where you can Dynamax, get double HP, take that super effective hit that would have KO'd you, and then continue with the game. You're gonna have to be a lot more careful now with your board positioning and what you have on the field at one time, because now those one-hit KO super effective moves are actually going to one-hit KO and kill you and knock out your Pokemon. You can't save it with Dynamax anymore. Next up is Luis Escarti. I'm sorry if I said your name wrong, but they said look for a good core. An example is Incineroar, Rillaboom, Tapu Fini, and then complete the team with Pokemon for specific situations. Do common calculations, start testing, and note useful calculations. Can you OHKO this Pokemon, or can you resist an attack, and what do you outspeed? And then he goes on to say, for playing, make sure you have a good game plan, make sure you predict the turn order, predict your opponent's moves, and choose options that maximize your game plan. So I think that was really good advice, is that you want to make sure that you have a good core set up for your team. In Dynamax formats with Sword and Shield, we kind of got a little bit of info about cores. We always knew that there were good Pokemon that paired well together, and those are considered cores. In non-Dynamax formats, it's going to be a lot more prevalent. You know, the core of, like he was saying, Fire, Water, Grass, Incineroar, Rillaboom, Tapu Fini are very powerful and very good at defensive pivoting to get board position in non-Dynamax formats. So you really want to make sure you have a good core of Pokemon, and then Pokemon that work well together. And then with that core, you can start to build off of it to help with specific situations. Does my core really struggle versus Regieleki? What can I do to, what Pokemon can I put and add to this core to help patch a weakness? And so I think that's really great advice, and that's something that you're gonna have to get really good at with these non-Dynamax formats, because team composition is huge in non-Dynamax formats. And then what he was saying, for when you play, you wanna make sure that you have a good idea of your game plan. You wanna have a good idea of how many turns you're gonna try to take to set up that game plan, what your opponent might do, how to predict their moves, and how you can make good choices throughout the game so that you can move your game plan forward. I always found that when you play VGC, you want to try to play your game and try to take control of the game and move your plan forward, while your opponent obviously tries to do the same for themselves. But as soon as you start trying to play your opponent's game, you start to fall behind, and it just becomes a whole issue. So really make sure that you have a game plan, you're trying to make smart moves, and that the moves that you're doing are moving your game plan forward. Next up, we have XCZach X20. He said, without Dynamax, less games are auto wins, auto losses on lead. Pivot to gain or maintain board control, set up or punish the pivot to hold board control. This one is really, really big, and I think this is the biggest difference between Dynamax and non-Dynamax formats. With Dynamax, I think we've all felt it. As soon as you lead, you see what your opponent led, and they led way better than you did, and they have the opportunity to just Dynamax their Calyrex and Shadow and just get a huge KO, start boosting and snowballing, and the game's over before you even had a chance to pick an attack. In non-Dynamax formats, this is very, very less prevalent. The power scale of non-Dynamax formats are so much lower and more manageable than anything with Dynamax. It's kind of insane once you actually play it. If you lead wrong, you're able to get you're able to get into the game a lot more easier. You have more opportunities to make good switches, good predictions to get yourself back into the game. There isn't going to be a whole lot of Pokemon that get set onto the field, get an instant +1, and now they can just hit you with whatever they want and OHKO your entire team. And there's only a couple Ultra Beasts that are even really relevant and viable that have the ability to boost their own stats. So really get used to switching your Pokemon for board control, and then being able to predict your opponent's switches so that you can punish them for defensive plays and continue to move your game forward. But the thing that I really like the most about non-Dynamax formats that he's talked about is that on turn 1, it's almost very rare that you'll lose the game on turn 1. So you'll have many opportunities to get back into the game. So really get used to switching, get used to board control, and positioning your Pokemon in a competitive and advantage way. Next, RedHoodMVD. He kind of says the same thing, play a lot of games to give more value positioning and setting up a winning scenario. Dynamax made it easier to set up scenarios with only the sheer pressure of double HP and 130 plus base power max moves, which also made it really hard to switch. So it kind of like what the previous tip was, is he kind of adds on to it. Make sure that you play a lot of games. Obviously, even with all the advice in this video, you're not just going to be able to go up onto Spikemuth Cup on Showdown and be a superstar. It's going to take a lot of games. Dynamax, in my opinion, played differently than any other format that we've ever experienced ever. The games were a lot quicker, and your Pokemon just had a lot more defensive capabilities with the ability to double their HP and take super effective attacks a lot better. Proc weakness policies, get max airstreams off, and just cause a whole lot of like headache and anxiety for anybody playing that game. And so you got to play a lot of games. It's a lot more switching, it's a lot more predicting, and it's a lot more safe moves, safe plays. You're able to switch in a lot better on your opponent because they're not hitting you with 140 base power G-Max Vine Lash that continues to do 140 damage every single turn for the rest of your life and knocking out all your Pokemon. That's not going to be a situation that you're ever going to run into these Dynamax games. Any moves that are really over 130 either lower your opponent's special attack or defenses by 1, 2, or 3 or 4 whatever stages, and you're able to hit back a lot better. So play a lot of games, get used to switching like we were talking about, get used to board control. You can switch now, guys. Get used to it, learn how to do it well, and learn how to predict your opponent switching so that you can punish those pivots. Next up is DanielJ. You're not immune to fake out with any mon you want anymore. This one is actually huge. Fake out was on Incineroar and on Rillaboom, and it still was pretty good on those teams with those compositions. Fake out is just the best move in the game. You can stop up an opponent Pokemon from attacking. It's priority, and the only way to stop it is if you have a faster fake out. Fake out is going to be 10 times more popular and prevalent in non-Dynamax formats because you can't just Dynamax your Pokemon to stop yourself from getting flinched. So having a way to either combat fake out, either with your own fake out or with my personal favorite, I like to use Pokemon that just stop priority completely. So Serena, and then my personal favorite, Tapu Lele, and then Indeedee female. You know, setting up psychic terrain, stopping fake out priority means that your team doesn't have to worry about getting flinched and faked out. And you don't have to worry about other things such as Prankster Thunder Waves or Prankster Taunts, etc., etc. So either having a way to combat with your own fake out or just stop it completely is going to be very huge in these non-Dynamax formats. And if you don't have a way to combat it, I guarantee you're going to find yourself suffering from many flinches and many game plans that are being set back because you're being flinched over and over again from fake out pivoting. And so really find a way to combat that yourself or stop it completely. That's really good advice, honestly. Like, just, it's going to be huge. It's going to be on every team on several Pokemon, trust me. Next up, PaulJ Spear. Play the current Spikemuth Cup format on Showdown or look for in-game ladder tournaments that use these rules. It is all Pokemon in the Sword and Shield decks, but Dynamax and Restricteds are banned. At London VGC has been hosting weekly in-game tournaments, and a bunch of other people have too. Obviously, the best way to get better at non-Dynamax formats is to play a non-Dynamax format. The one that's been the most popular that the community has been pleading with and asked Showdown to put it on, and they so kindly did, thank you Pokemon Showdown, is the Spikemuth Cup on Showdown. This is a no Dynamax, no restricted format, so that you are playing with just the national decks of Sword and Shield. So that you'll still have Regieleki, you'll still have Rillaboom, you'll still have those Pokemon, but you won't have like Zacian or Calyrex Shadow or Calyrex Ice, Kyogre, Groudon, those are all banned. So this gives you the best way. This is the closest thing we can get to right now for Scarlet and Violet. And it's gonna give you great practice for an upcoming non-Dynamax format. So really grind out those games and think through all your turns, practice your switching. And if you lose a game, go ahead and like look at your replays, see what you could have did better. And even if you win, but it was like kind of shaky, you're not really comfortable with how you won, you can even look at that replay and think, well, how could I have won, in a more comfortable manner? Is there a place where that game almost went south for me? Or is there a place where I was losing, but I picked up that win? And look for those patterns so that you can apply them in your next games in the future. The last one we're going to talk about is from Pokemon Master Council. If you could include any utility moves that will be prevalent when DMAX is gone, that would be amazing. I've never played VGC in a non-DMAX format, so learning which moves neutralized by DMAX could be helpful going into Series 9 or Gen 9. So this is a really good question. There actually wasn't a whole lot of moves that Dynamax made irrelevant or just stayed off. Most utility moves in VGC are actually still pretty standard. So utility moves like Fake Out are still going to be really popular, even though that was supposed to nerf Fake Out. It was still on almost every team on Dynamax formats. I would say that one move that I can think of that was really kind of set back by Dynamax was Wide Guard. Wide Guard in past formats was really good. It's, there was a lot of spread moves that you could stop. So like Rock Slide, Earthquake, Heat Wave, but with the restricteds in Series 12 and their ability to Dynamax and turn Water Spouts into just Max Geysers and Precipice Blades into Max Quake, single target moves, people started to stop, moved away from Wide Guard because it wouldn't help them if they Dynamaxed. So they stopped using Wide Guard, even though it would have been really good if they couldn't Dynamax, because then you could stop those spread moves. There's a lot of spread moves in Series 12. but people just didn't use wide guard because if they thought that you had wide guard, or if they knew that you had wide guard, then they could just Dynamax and you would be wide guarding while they max Quake into your partner slot. So wide guard, I think, is a very good utility move that hasn't seen a lot of love in the last 3 years because of Dynamax, that I think will be very popular, and you'll see it a lot going into Gen 9. Other moves like Stealth Rocks and Spikes and Toxic Spikes have never been popular in VGC, so I don't think those will be relevant at all even going into Gen 9. I think those will still stay in the singles formats where there's a lot more switching and a lot more of that damage is more beneficial. So I don't think we'll see any of those either. The other utility moves like Snarl, Will-O-Wisp, Taunt, etc. are still very popular. They're still used a lot in restricted and Dynamax formats. So like I was saying, I think really the only move that I can think of is wide guard. So continue to use those utility moves that you saw in the restricted formats. They're still very good. They're still very viable. They'll be even better going into a non-restricted format. But I don't think you'll see anything out of the ordinary that you haven't already seen in the last few years if you've been competing regularly. So just take that knowledge you learned from those Dynamax formats with those utility moves, and you can apply them into these non-Dynamax formats and it'll work just fine. So to add a little bit of my own advice going into a non-Dynamax format is that you're able to have a lot more freedom with your play style. With Dynamax and with restricteds, there were so many powerful moves, so many just strong, bulky Pokemon that if you weren't running like really bulky max HP and like screens, like Reflect, Light Screen, and a lot of Intimidate, a lot of Snarl, a lot of Status, that you weren't going to do very well because there wasn't enough power to OHKO these Pokemon that Dynamaxed, and they would just kind of sit on the field and sponge attacks, and it was just kind of a war of attrition, and that's how it was played. And some people really liked that. Some people really liked that it was just pretty much all defense, all sponging, and the games went on for a long time while Porygon 2 Eerie Impulsed into a Calm Minding Tapu Fini for the rest of eternity. Without Dynamax, I think there's a lot more space for you to experiment with your play style. You can now make a lot more offensive teams, and you can make a lot more balanced teams that have a good combination of defense and offense, of speed and defensive capabilities, and it doesn't have to just all be like defense, slow, spongy, and just hope that you can out damage your opponent in some way through their screens, and it's just this whole back and forth thing. So really experiment with your play style. If you're not used to using like quicker, stronger, a little bit more frail Pokemon, then try that out and see if it's something that you like, because in this format that's coming up, it's going to play like completely different than what you've been playing in the last few years. So really experiment with your play style, experiment with different Pokemon. You don't have to just use bulky defensive Pokemon to try to win the game. There is a good balance that you can use, and a lot of these Pokemon are a lot stronger without Dynamax. So give that a go. So that's all the advice that I have for you guys today. I really hope that you got something out of it. I hope that it gave you a little bit more idea of what to expect and what you can work on going into a non-Dynamax format. To kind of go over everything just a little bit, it's play a lot of games, make sure that you're getting familiar with how it plays, learn how to make good switches that give you good board control and move your own game plan forward. Make sure you have a good core, make sure everything on your team works together and has a purpose, and make sure that your utility is useful to your team, and make sure that you have a way to stop priority moves or combat them yourself with fake outs, thunder waves, prankster, yada, yada, yada. So those are a lot of things that you can work on going into non-Dynamax formats to make sure that you're prepared and ready for the upcoming season in January. Thank you all so much for watching this video, and thank you for everybody on Twitter that participated and gave some of your own advice to everybody here on YouTube. I appreciate you all. I hope you all have a good rest of your day, night, afternoon, wherever it is. We'll see you in the next video. Mwah.